Do you ever wish someone would draw you a map and give you the directions to the career of your dreams? If so, consider this podcast your GPS to a career where you feel strong, fulfilled, and passionate about your work, day in and day out. On this show, I'm sharing the tools to help you advocate for your strengths, discover your passions, and learn from folks who transform their careers for the better. My name is Joyelle Crawford, your fairy god mentor. And with 18 years of experience in HR at a Fortune 50 company and 20 years of coaching and mentoring top leaders, I am thrilled to be your guide on this career journey. Let's get started. Welcome to Career View Mirror, the podcast where we look back at the careers of inspiring professionals to gain insights on our own journeys. I'm your host, Joyelle Crawford, and today we're joined by Dr. Corinne Auman. She's the author of the best-selling book, Keenagers, and the founder of YourCareer Navigators. Dr. Auman is an expert in family caregiving, aging, and overcoming ageism in today's society. Fun fact, Corinne and I have been friends since we met in undergraduate school so many decades ago. I'm not even going to get into the decades together at Elon. We lived on the same floor and have stayed connected for, I'm going to say it, I'll just say it. We stayed connected for about 31 years. Can you believe
I started
that?
to say we just had a reunion year last year, and that number, I'm like, what? That can't be.
There's something wrong. The math is not mathing. 30 years ago was the 70s.
Correct. That is correct. Or at least that's how my brain works, right?
That's exactly how my brain works too. So I want to welcome you, Dr. Auman, to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I wanted to start with your background. Now I know where you started an undergraduate school, but what experience inspired you to pursue a career focused on aging and overcoming ageism?
So my interest in older adults really stemmed from growing up right next door to my grandparents and that relationship with them. Mm-hmm. And very quickly, a series of events happened. And when I was in about 8th grade, my grandfather passed away. And my mom and her sister realized very quickly that they had a mother who had dementia. And my grandfather had done such a good job of protecting her and taking care of her that they didn't know that. And wow. I kind of watched them journey through taking care of her and making mm-hmm. mistakes along the way, like getting home care, moving into mm-hmm. facilities, picking the wrong facility. And just remember thinking like, why isn't there somebody who helps you with this? And so anyway, that continued until my junior year of college when my grandmother actually passed away. And I went on and got my graduate degree in developmental psychology, but my specialty area is adulthood and aging. So that was always of interest to me. I always thought I wanted to work with older adults in some way. I wanted to have a career in that field. So for several years, I taught in psychology and gerontology departments. And then in 2012, I finally said, hey, if I'm ever going to start that business helping people navigate this, then it's time to do it. And so my husband let me, or no, he willingly jumped off the cliff with me.
Yes, I was going to say he supported you. You guys went off the cliff like in Thelma and Louise together in that car of entrepreneurship.
That's right. That's right. He's already an entrepreneur. And so he was very supportive, but it was that sort of, okay, if I'm ever going to do it, it's only more complicated now. It's time to do it.
Indeed. Oh, it's a beautiful story. I love hearing the origin story of it because, we're going through our own little tracks and doing our things. I was also in psychology in undergrad, but I wanted to be a guidance counselor. I wanted to be the guidance counselor that I didn't have in high school. And
you kind of are a guidance counselor.
Yeah, I'm like a grown-up guidance counselor now. So So it's just cool to hear how, the basis of what inspired you to move forward and even go into business for yourself. What would be a typical day for you? What does that look like in your field of work?
So, I have a team of care managers who work for me now. There's
Mhm,
5 of us total, and that's social workers,
mhm,
nurses, myself with my gerontology degree. And a typical day for me is kind of coordinating all of them and kind of
mhm,
what they're doing for clients. We get a lot of calls on a daily basis, and it's typically someone who's in a crisis. They
mhm,
um, Everything was going fine with mom until, and something has happened. There's been a
mhm,
fall or a heart condition, whatever it is. And
mhm.
now the caregiver, the spouse or the adult child is calling, going, I need to know everything about senior living, Medicare. I need to understand my parents' finances. What do you mean Medicare doesn't pay for any of this? All those sorts of
Yes.
coordination of care sorts of things that
Mhm.
most of us kind of bury our heads in the sand about. Like, we know we drive past those senior living communities, but we
Yes.
really don't understand like what they are or what they do there, and
Yeah.
until we really need to. And so my team really helps families navigate that and figure out, what are the steps, what do we need to do next, how do we get the best care, what can we afford, what can't we afford, all those sorts of things. So that's part of my day. And then the other part of my day is, I still teach in a gerontology department at Winston-Salem State University.
Nice.
And I also do podcasts and try to
Mhm.
advocate. I'm trying to get the word out to
Yes.
people about how much control you actually have over your own aging, and
Mhm,
how your outlook on that will
mhm.
shape everything about how your older adulthood actually goes, how it unfolds.
And I think thank you for sharing that because um, I think it's such a mystery. We know it's a reality that's going to happen. We are aging every day, but it is a mystery of like what happens when we can't, do it all on our own, or that we need like some legal assistance, power of attorney, legal paperwork, all of that stuff that's needed to care for. And then you think about your own aging and your own mortality. So I
Hmm.
mean, I think it's really great that you walked us through the typical day, because there could be people who are interested. That's the whole point of this podcast, is to really have my guests reflect on their past so that others can pave their own future, and they
Hmm.
may be interested in doing a career in aging and gerontology and caregiving services. It's really great.
It's a growing field. I mean, because we are living so much longer, we
Longer.
are
Mhm,
and we have a large older adult population, but we are
mhm,
all going to live longer because of our
mhm.
health care, because of our nutrition, all of these things. And so it's a great field to go into. It's sometimes hard for me to get people excited about it, but it really is.
I really think it's important for us to know all the ups and the downs, like I think it's important to know what the typical day is and the realities of what ageism looks like in our world. Um, would you be able to share one myth it is like that's out there about working in your industry, in your field, that you wish you could just eliminate?
So I think one of the things that keeps people from working with older adults in general,
Mhm,
in whatever way, is just kind of our negative age stereotypes in general, right?
mhm,
People don't think they want to work with older adults because they think, oh, older adults are all cranky, or
mhm,
they won't take any advice, and I won't be able to, they won't listen to me, or whatever, fill in the blank. Think of any
mhm,
age stereotype you'd like. And
mhm,
my thought is, if you've met one 75-year-old, you've met one 75-year-old. They are, older adults are incredibly diverse, just like every other age group, right? It's not
mhm.
They don't fit into this stereotypical mold that we try to put them in. And I really wish people could get past that kind of view, that negative view, to see older adults for the rich, diverse, interesting group of people that they are. Do you have people who won't listen to you and are set in their ways? Sure. But that's also true with 30-year-olds. That's not something that's exclusive to being an older adult. So,
Indeed. No, I love that. I love that myth buster, right? And I think, with the kind of clients that I work with, the age range or average age of my clients tends to end around 60 for who I'm calling in, from a executive and career coaching perspective. But I hear from people who are in their 60s or early 70s, sharing with me their frustrations of, as we're living longer, they can't or may not be able to retire when they want to. So they need to find work, and they're very frustrated about finding work because I think those assumptions are out there that, they're set in their ways, or they've made so much of a salary that they wouldn't want to take a pay cut. What's your advice for older employees who are seeking work or seeking needs, or like, what would you like to put out there, as a shout out to hiring managers about older workers?
So I want to actually back up a little bit on what you were saying. So when we think of retirement, people think of like 65 as the retirement age, right? And that's because of Social Security. When Social Security was first enacted, the average American lifespan was 67. So we really only expected you to be retired for a couple of years, right?
Wow.
Now the average lifespan is like 77, and that's the average. So we've got more centenarians, people who live to 100, and super centenarians, people living past 110, than we've ever had before.
That's my goal, 110.
It's a great goal. It's a great goal. So when we think about like retirement, we have we've stuck with that age 65 as the retirement age. And it's what people kind of have in their head, and it's what they plan for, all those sorts of things. But if you retire at 65, or if you get laid off, if you stop working for whatever reason at 65, you're probably looking not at a couple of years, you're looking at a couple of decades in front of you, to which you must find employment or some kind of purpose. And I get people who will say things back to me, who'll say, my purpose in retirement is going to be, sitting around and drinking margaritas, doing nothing. And I get that, because we definitely have this cultural narrative around that it's this time of well-earned rest and relaxation. And that's great at first. Who wants to work a 40-hour work week?
Right.
But then after a couple of years, people get bored, that you can spend a couple of years not doing much. You can't spend a couple of decades not doing much. So back to your point, like with the hiring managers and with us people in general, everybody really needs to start to reshape how they're thinking about, when does older adulthood start? What is a retirement age? Like, should I be retiring at 65? Should I be thinking that my employees are going to retire at 65? Or should I be having conversations with them about, hey, what are you thinking? How many more years do you want to work? Do you want to continue with professional development? Do you want to go up for that promotion? Because what happens is, as people approach retirement age, companies stop investing in them. They stop putting them up for promotions. They stop sending them for professional development, because what the company is thinking is, well, you're going to be out in a couple of years, so we don't want to invest in you. But that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if I'm that employee and I know that they're not investing in me, I know they're not putting me up for promotions, I know they're not sending me to professional training, well, then I probably stop really caring about this job, and I'm not invested anymore. So
Right.
I wish we could have honest conversations between employers and employees about what are your plans. Do you think you're going to keep working? And the employees could give honest answers about that too, right?
Right.
What do you think you're going to do, so that we could continue that relationship as long as it's mutually beneficial. Maybe I want to go back to part-time. Maybe I want to job share with somebody else. I want to job share with somebody who's younger, who maybe it has a young child at home and they
Right.
only want to work part-time. And we can do that for several years until maybe I'm ready to retire. There's all kinds of creative things we can do other than assume that somebody is ready to exit when we haven't had a conversation with them about that.
So yeah, you hit on so many points. And I think the biggest key is to communicate plans instead of just kind of almost like seeing not seeing the individual as a person, almost seeing them as invisible in the
Right.
workspace, in the workplace after you hit a certain age. And that's ageism. That's like complete age discrimination. And I know that organizations try hard to prevent that at all costs, but it's not always possible.
Well, and in the defense of the hiring managers and the people in the corporations, we are all ageist. I mean, we have been brought up in this anti-aging culture. It has been taught to us from the time we are small children. They've done studies. 3-year-olds already have negative views about aging because in their storybooks, older people are always the witches and the scary old men, right?
Yes.
So we teach people this from a very young age. And, my point with the book and with my advocacy work is that we all, if we want this to change, if I want to work as long as I want to work, and then I need to start advocating for a different view of older adults. And the person that starts with is me, because I have to stop and say, why do I think what I do about older adults? What things are coming out of my mouth when I talk? My husband caught me the other day. I had my phone and my AirPods, and my AirPods wouldn't connect to my phone. And I said, "Oh, these are my old ones." I said, "They're just old and cranky." And he looked at me and said, "That's ageist." And I was like, "Yep, yeah, because it is. I mean, there it is. There's what has been fed to me." And I'm trying so hard to be positive and to say positive things and to look at it in a positive way. But I mean, I have been raised in this culture that I can't just turn off overnight.
Right.
And so, but I do think the first step is acknowledging it and making ourselves stop and go, why do I think that? Why do I think that my older employees are going to want to retire? Why do I think that I should stop investing in them? Why do I think I wouldn't hire this older person? You mentioned salary. I gave a talk to a group of business professionals about this very thing one time, and a guy came up to me afterwards and he said, "Oh, I'm exactly what you're talking about." He said, "I retired. I was so bored." He said, "I went back and now I'm working for this firm as a consultant. And I've been doing that for a couple of years." He said, "I'm making a quarter of what I made when I was, at the top of my career." He said, "But I don't care." He said, "I want to engage with people. I want to stay on top of the field. I want to have something to go do every day." And that's what mattered much more than the salary. And I know that won't be the case for every person, but it's worth having the conversation with that potential employee to say, well, what is it that you're, looking for here?
Yeah. What's the plan? It's clear that you are a seasoned professional. What's your plan? What's your plan? And I think that that's beautiful. And I hope every hiring manager in the world is listening to my podcast, because that's how popular my podcast is. Thank you, all of our listeners and viewers. So I'm hoping that everyone hears that call to action, so that we could just start the conversation. Just have the conversation. Don't avoid it. Don't assume.
Right.
I remember grammar school teacher saying, you make an ass out of you and me when you assume. So I just always remember that.
Yep.
You
Yep.
you had mentioned something very interesting about the gentleman that you were speaking about who, was like, it's not about that. It's not all about the salary. That's not what I'm looking for, which led me to thinking about the why. Why? What's your why? What gets you out of bed in the morning, Corinne?
So specifically related to this, not related to like my 4 kids and the the other things.
It could be tied to that.
It could be tied. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think my why for writing the book and for the business that I run and things like that, we are all old people in training. We are all Keenagers in training, to use my own terminology.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have these moments where we realize that we're aging, right? The first time you see a gray hair, or the first time you have a doctor that's younger than you and you're like, wait, that can't be. We all have those moments, and we have a choice to embrace that, or we can kind of deny it and hide. And I think this is my journey as much as it is everyone else's, but I'm trying to figure out for myself, how do I look forward to my own aging? How do I embrace it? How do I make this as positive as it can possibly be? Because I have seen in my work in care management, I have seen the myriad of ways it can go wrong. And a lot of the ways it goes wrong is because the people were afraid of their aging. They denied their aging. They buried their head in the sand and they pretended, I'm just going to grow old and die warm in my bed. And I don't need to make any plans. And I don't need to, tell my kids what I want. And I don't need to do my healthcare power of attorney and all that sort of stuff. And so how do I empower myself on this journey? But then also, how do I empower other people? Because you have so much control over how this journey is going to go, but you have to decide that you are going to take the reins and make it the best journey it can be, rather than just kind of sitting back and going, no, that aging thing, that's not happening to me. I'm not doing that. Which, I think a lot of people do.
Look at the industry. There's all these skincare creams and things, anti-aging and, the cryogenics and all the things.
Yeah. Notice too that it's not the smooth skin care industry. It's the anti-aging industry. You look at these ads and it's like, win the battle against aging. I am sorry. That is not a battle you are going to win. You
never.
Just aren't. Never. It's going to happen. We're older at the end of this podcast than we were at the beginning. It's just, you can't win that. But that's what they're trying to sell you. And it's hard. I think it's hard for us to live in a world that gives us that messaging, and then also look forward to these years that previous generations didn't get. I said, in the 1930s, the average lifespan was 67. Now you've probably got a couple of decades more than that.
Right.
Boy, wouldn't it be great to look forward to that rather than being like, no, I don't want to do that. Yeah.
I think it's great. I think it's not living in denial. It's really facing the reality. And I love your why. It's how am I going to age in a way that I have control and agency, and how am I going to help others do the same thing? I think that's beautiful. So we keep on mentioning this beautiful best-selling book, Keenagers, and I'm holding it up for everyone to see. And for those who cannot see, I am wearing owl earrings because there's this beautiful owl on the cover of Corinne's book. Keenagers telling a new story about aging, and I've got these owl earrings because they're very keenagery.
They are.
There are excellent tips to apply to professionals at any stage of their career. And in your book, can you explain what the the whole premise of what a teenager is and why you felt it was important to write about this group right now.
So I've been working with older adults, in my career for 20 plus
Mm-hmm.
years now. And I would challenge you or anyone to find much language, hardly any language associated with older adulthood that is
Mm-hmm.
positive, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I started trying to write the book and I wanted to talk about all the things we can look forward to as we grow older and fighting ageism, and how to plan and prepare and all these things, I sat down with a friend of mine. I'm like, I can't come up with a word. I can't come up with a word to talk about older adulthood in a positive way it just active agers is the best I can find. That's what my
Mm-hmm.
local senior center just changed their name to. But
Mm.
everything else is either like pretty neutral,
Yeah.
seniors, retirees, older adults, or it's negative. I mean, you can find a
Mm-hmm.
million negative words: codger,
Mm-hmm.
old coot, hag, crone. I mean, there's just lists. And
Yes.
so she called her mom. My friend called her mom and said, "Mom, what do you and your friends like to be called?" And she said, "We call ourselves Keenagers." And I love that
Love
because
it.
the definition of keen is like being engaged,
Yes.
wanting to learn. So older adults today are not your stereotypical older adults from 50 or even 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Older adults today, we live longer, we're healthier. They are keen to learn, to maybe
Mm-hmm.
continue working, to be involved, to be engaged with life.
Mm-hmm.
They don't
Mm-hmm.
want to just retire and sit around and do nothing. And so that's where the word came from. I think it's really appropriate.
Nice.
And it's positive, right? It has
Yes.
this kind of positive connotation to it. And I think I say in the book like 50s, 60s, 70s, but it really is any older adult who is still engaged with life, right? That they
Yes.
are doing things, learning, and it can
Mm-hmm.
be anything. I mean, I've been talking about work. So maybe you
Mm-hmm.
keep working, but maybe
Mm-hmm.
you volunteer, or maybe you caregive for your grandchildren or a spouse or a loved one. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there's a million things, but I want to stay involved with life. I want to do something
Right.
that's getting me out of bed on a Wednesday morning sort of idea. And
Mm-hmm.
we have so many older adults now that fit that mold, much more so than they fit our stereotypical ideas of what
Mm-hmm.
older adulthood is.
I love that. I love that. Actively engaged. And I think keeping that concept of teenagers could positively impact the workplace and other people's career trajectories with that mindset. Do
Yeah.
you
I
have any
mean,
advice for folks who are teenagers who are still, you know, going at it and working and doing their thing?
well, I mean, keep going. That's the thing. Like, don't let, one of the things I see is, people get to this stage of their careers, of their lives, and it's maybe you are at retirement age and you're going to get your gold watch and you're going to retire, and people can become a little lost. Like,
Mm,
we don't prepare people for this stage of life the way we prepare you for like going to college, or
yeah.
all any these other transitions
Yeah.
that we might go through. And
Yeah.
part of that is because this is a new thing. It's
Yeah.
just within the last 50 years or so that we've had people living so much longer. So it's a new time period that
Hmm. Hmm.
people didn't get before. And now, if you get to 65 and you do retire, people can kind of be a little lost. Like, what do
Yeah.
I do now? Like, can I go back to work? Should I? Like, what do I want to do with this time? And so, when people are planning for their teenager years, what I would suggest is thinking about not only financially, we got a ton of advocacy out there for
Hmm.
financial planning
Hmm.
for this time period, but I would
Definitely.
say you also need to plan for your social. How are you going to get social connections? Because a lot of us get those connections at work, and if you're not going to work
Right.
anymore, where are you going to get
Where to
those?
get it? Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do with your time? What your emotional connections, like your purpose in life? Because we all want something that gives our life meaning, and we need to think about what those things are going to be, particularly if you've been someone who's been very career oriented. One of the people I interviewed in the book was an oncologist, and he worked 60 plus hours a week every single week. And when he retired and I interviewed him, he was really struggling because he was like, I didn't have time for hobbies when I was working, and I don't know what to do with myself now. So, I mean, it's a struggle. So you have to figure out what is this going to look like for me, not only financially, but also all these other areas of our life. And I want to go back for 1 second to the language thing. I do think using Keenagers, I mean, maybe it's ostentatious of me to say we need a new word, right? Like
own it.
But I do think the language matters, because the language not only changes how we perceive ourselves, because I'm going to say I'm a Keenager in training now. I'm getting ready to be a Keenager.
But it kids.
It changes how other people see us. When you have that new language, it changes the perception versus all that old stereotypical language that we've had for so long.
I love it. I love all this goodness. You're dropping all the gems, Corinne. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
These are really great pieces of advice. I mean, as we wrap up, what final piece of advice would you give to our listeners about preparing for their own journey into teenagerhood? You talked a lot about kind of figuring out those different facets of your life, like where are you going to go? How are you going to emotionally connect? How are you going to socially connect? Do you have any other pieces of advice for us, for our listeners?
So your outlook on your own aging matters. I'm saying we need to have a positive outlook, but there's lots of research on this too. Dr. Becca Levy up at the Yale School of Public Health has shown with decades of research now that you're having a positive outlook about your own aging. You'll live on average 7 years longer. You will have less risk of dementia. You'll have less risk of cardiovascular disease. You'll walk faster than if you are down on yourself, thinking, oh, this aging thing sucks. It's all downhill from here. It kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in that way. So, so work on your own ageism and work on your own positive attitude about what's to come, because it really does matter.
Oh, I love this. Thank you so much for joining us and again, imparting all this wonderful wisdom to our podcast. I want to thank you for your insights. Your work is truly inspiring, and the narrative around aging and careers is it's enlightening. And I'm hoping that I know our guests will feel the same way. To our listeners, remember to check out Dr. Auman's book, Keenagers, for more information about this fantastic topic. And you can also find information we're going to put in our listener notes about more information about her company, so that you can, if you'd like to be a client with Choice Care Navigators, you can do that as well. A shameless plug. I'm going to help the business out. We gotta help each other out, lift while we climb. But they can find me. They can find me at CorinneAuman.com. Corinne, you've got your own website. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll definitely make sure we put that in our. I knew that, but we'll put it in the liner notes as well. Thank you just so much for your time today. Thank you so much for listening to Career View Mirror. If you got value from this episode, please consider leaving a rating and review for the show on Apple Podcasts, or head on over to Spotify and click 5 stars for our show. We also have a YouTube channel with video versions of our episodes, so subscribe over there for more content. Thanks again, and I will see you in the next episode.